SwiftData was just released as part of WWDC 2023, so let's build a full app using SwiftData and Xcode 15, which is currently still in beta, so you will have to download that from the developer website or using a tool like xcodes.app. But let's get right into it. I have already created a brand new Xcode project and selected SwiftData to be used for my persistence layer. So this is everything that got auto-generated from Xcode. Let me quickly re-indent that. And we want to build the app that you can see in the simulator here on the side. So it will be a tracker for all of your app ideas that you might have during this WWDC week. So we are able to add a new app idea, which brings up a sheet here, give it a name and add a description. And then we can save that. It will be saved to SwiftData. We can click on that and edit the description and name parameters however we would like. And then we can also add features to that idea. So we can say feature 1, just hit enter, and it will also get persisted. So if we go back out and back in again, you will see feature 1 is persisted here. All right, so let's start to actually build this app. And first of all, I want to get rid of basically everything in this example project. So we will not be using an item. So let's just move that file to trash. We don't need this query for items here. Inside of our body, we will just add an empty view real quick. And we can get rid of both of these add and delete functions. And of course, this will not compile anymore because we're using the item for our model container in the preview and in the actual app struct. So we will first of all create a new Swift file and name that app idea, and this will be our model that we will be using. So for that, let's import SwiftData and let's create our model using the add_model Swift macro annotation, and let's call it app idea. I want this to have 3 attributes. First of all, I want them to have a name. I want them to have a detailed description, which is also a string. And then I also want to save the creation date to SwiftData, just in case we want to sort our list in the future. So let's also save the creation date, which is a date, which is a type that we can import through SwiftUI, for example. Now I also want to make sure that the app idea's name is unique. So what I can do here is use the add attribute and say make it unique, and this way perhaps we can even click on that and open it in the documentation. Okay, so there's no documentation for that yet, but this way we make sure that all app ideas that are saved to SwiftData are actually unique with respect to their name attribute. And then let's also create an initializer here, and Xcode has a nice autocomplete here for us, where we can actually get rid of the creation date and just say when we create a new app idea, that is when the creation date should be instantiated with just date.now, which is available as of iOS 16, by the way. And then we also want to create a second model for the features in our app ideas. Now this is where it gets interesting because we will use SwiftData relationships here. So I will call this model app feature. And of course we will import SwiftData again. And we will create another model class. Of course, call this one app feature. And each feature will have a detailed description and a creation date again. So we can basically do the same thing as in our app idea. So creation date, which is once again a date, for which we will once again need to import either Foundation or SwiftUI, would probably work. I also want to make sure that app ideas have unique features, so we will once again be using the add attribute annotation here and make sure that the detailed description is unique. And then let's also create an initializer. And once again, we can get rid of the date here and say the creation date is right now. So how do we link app features to app ideas? It's actually very easy. So in our app idea, we can define a relationship to app features. And we do that by just saying we want a new variable, which is an array of app feature, and it should be empty by default. Right now we don't have a relationship established yet, so we will use the add relationship annotation here, and as you can see there are a bunch of different parameters that we could pass, but the only one that I will pass is cascade. That means that if our app idea gets deleted, all of the features which are part of this relationship will also get deleted. We could now also add the app idea to the app feature, but in our case we actually don't even need that, so we can just skip it for now. And with that said, we can get rid of both of these and just have our app idea.self and our app feature.self here for our model container in both the content view preview and of course in our actual application definition. Alright, so now that we have our data model set up for SwiftData, we can start coding the list of our app ideas. So for that we will use the add query property wrapper, and we just want to define a list of ideas, which is a list of app idea. And then this will get populated through SwiftData with the add query property wrapper automatically. So then in here we can get started by creating a navigation stack, and in there we will create a list over our ideas, grab an idea in. We can give that list a navigation title of, let's say, app ideas. And we can now create our navigation link, which is the list row for each of these ideas. So let's create a navigation link, and here we will already use the navigation stack that was introduced about a year ago. So we will pass as a value our app idea, and the label will just be a vstack with a leading alignment. We don't care about the spacing parameter, and we want to show the idea's name and the detailed description. So a text of idea.name, and then below that another text of idea.detailed description. And for detailed description, I will use a new view modifier here, which is text scale dot secondary. This way we can make sure it's scaled to be the secondary text here. And I will also change the foreground style to be secondary. That way it will be grayed out a bit, and the focus will be on the idea name instead of the idea description. Let's run that in the simulator real quick to see how far we've come so far. Alright, so we now have a completely empty list inside of our navigation stack. So let's next add a toolbar item to open up the sheet to create a new app idea. So below the navigation title, I will add a toolbar with a button to say add, for example, and then let's create a quick state variable, and I will just call it show add dialog, and it will be false by default. And then in our button we can just toggle that, and of course with that in place we also need to add our sheet to actually show something. So right below the toolbar, let's add a sheet, and it should be presented if show add dialog is true. And as the content, we will once again create a navigation stack, just so we can have a toolbar and perhaps a toolbar item. And inside of that navigation stack, I will be using a form. And inside of this form, we want to now be able to create a new app idea. For that, let's add two more state variables. I will say new name, should be an empty string, and then also new description should also be an empty string. And let's create two text fields to write to those values. So let's create a text field for name with the text of new name. And then let's also create a text field for our description with a text of new description. And we also want to set the vertical axis here so it grows vertically if the user types stuff in there. And then let's also add a navigation title here saying new app idea. And let's also add two toolbar items. The first one to dismiss this sheet, and the second one to actually save this new app idea. So let's add the first button, and I will just say dismiss, and in here we will just say show add dialog.toggle. Then let's add the second button, let's call it save, and in here we can now actually create our app idea and save it to SwiftData, which is super easy. So let's say let idea equals an app idea, and here we're using the initializer that we defined in our app idea beforehand, this one right here. As the name, we will pass the new name. As the detailed description, we will pass the new description. Of course, you could now check that both of these are empty and stuff like that. I will omit that just for the sake of this video, just to keep it short. Now that we have created our app idea, we actually need to still insert it into our model context. So say model context dot insert our new idea. And then let's also close this dialog here. So let's give that a run. And if I press add now, a sheet will come up, which is not what we want. So let's actually quickly add the presentation detents modifier. And let's say we only want this sheet to be of a medium detent. If we run this again, should look fine now. Okay, so now we have our medium detent. We can say idea here and description in here. Hit save, and it's now saved to SwiftData and shown in our list. As you can see, this navigation link arrow here is grayed out, which means that we cannot actually click on the navigation link right now, which makes sense because we haven't added a navigation destination yet. So right below our navigation title, let's add a navigation destination for the app idea type. And in here, I will actually just turn this into something a bit shorter, just like that. In here, we will then create our edit view. So let's create a new SwiftUI view, and I will just call it edit app idea view. And we can then use that edit app idea view here. And as the idea, we can just pass $0, which is the app idea, that is the value of our navigation link. Of course, edit app idea view doesn't take in an app idea yet, so let's fix that next. Okay, so first of all, let's import SwiftData, and then let's make this view take in an app idea. I want this to be bindable, so we can use bindings to actually edit this idea. Let's call it idea and let it be an app idea. And in here, we will also need our model context in just a second. Well, actually, I don't think we need it, so let's get rid of that. And let's also get rid of the preview, as we don't need it since we're just using the simulator here. So for this view, I want this to just be a form with a nav title of our idea.name, and then I will just add 2 text fields to edit the idea, and then also a section to add the features. So in here, we will get started by creating a text field for the name, which is just $idea.name. We can use this projected value syntax here because we're using the add bindable annotation for our app idea. Let's create the second text field for our description. And the text will once again be idea.detailed description. And here we will once again add the vertical axis. And now let's already have a look at what we've come up with. All right, so now we can click on an idea here and we will get presented with our edit app idea view. And in here, we can actually edit the app idea and it gets persisted to SwiftData automatically. Let's next work on the app features section. So let's add a section here called features. And in there, leave some space for something we will do in just a second. So first of all, let's add a for each for our idea.features. And let's grab a feature in. And in here, we will just add a text of the feature.detailed description, nothing fancy. Above this for each, we will allow the user to add new features. So for that, let's add a new state variable. So let's say new feature description. And that should be an empty string. And then in here, we will just add a text field. Let's say new feature, and let's bind that to a new feature description. And we will actually use the onSubmit closure here, so we don't have to add a button anywhere. Once this gets submitted, we will say let feature equals an app feature with our new feature description. And then we will just say idea.features.append our new feature. And then let's also reset that description. So let's say new feature description.remove all. All right, so having a look at this now, the app will open. We can select our, let's create a proper app idea to test it. So we will say perhaps a workout tracker. And as a description, be able to create a workout regime. Let's save that, and we can add some features. So for example, a calendar of workouts. If we hit enter, and it will get saved as a feature. If we launch the app again, that is still there. All right, if you actually want to track your app ideas, I would suggest you to try out LaunchBuddy. It's completely free, available in the App Store or with the link in the pinned comment or video description. Free to get started and makes you actually work on your app ideas that you have with this DAP.DC. Welcome back to the Build a Full SwiftData App course. This is lesson 2, and today we will cover adding an empty state to the app ideas list. We will also be able to delete app ideas and app features. We will be adding some haptic engine SensoryFeedback, and we will be improving our query by adding a filter and a sorting method. So let's get right into it. First of all, I want to talk to you about an issue that is currently going on with SwiftData in the beta cycle of Xcode 15. So I'm using Xcode 15 beta 1, which you can see right here. The build number is this thing right here. This is the first beta version, so I am running into issues with deleting objects from SwiftData, and I will show you that in just a second, but then I will turn that bug into a feature, and we will implement archiving app ideas instead, which arguably makes a lot more sense anyways. So we have a list of our app ideas in here in our content view, and the list row is basically a navigation link. So to that navigation link, we could now attach a modifier to get rid of it. So to make things a bit easier, I will actually grab that navigation link and turn it into a new subview. So let's Command X that to get it out of there. And let's create a new SwiftUI view, and I will call it App Ideas List Row. Let's create that. And in the body parameter here, let's pass back our navigation link. And then, of course, we will have to have a var idea, which is an app idea. And just like that, we already have, let's get rid of the preview, we're not using it anyways. Just like that, we already have factored out the app ideas list row. And then we can just use that in our list instead, and also get rid of the idea in here. We can just use the $0 syntax to pass it into the list row. And running this in the simulator, it will look basically exactly the same as it did before. So we still have our list of ideas. I added some ideas here to test. And everything behaves exactly the same. We can still click on them and so on, everything exactly the same. So now inside of this list row, let's implement a swipe action to delete one of these app ideas. And we will be implementing this, but I can already tell you it won't be working. So in the swipe action, let's add a button. And I always like to use a button with a role if I have a destructive or a cancel button, just so the system knows what this button is and can perhaps do some changes to how it's laid out or designed. So I will actually not be using this initializer. I will be adding a label manually because I actually want a SwiftUI label saying delete, and I will be using the trash symbol. And then in here we can actually delete the app idea, which we can do by using the model context from the SwiftUI environment, and in there we can just say model context dot delete the idea, and that should be everything that we need to do. So let's try and run that in the simulator. And now, for example, for this last test idea here, we have a swipe action to delete. And if I press on it, it actually gets deleted. Okay, interesting. This did crash in my testing, so let's run that again and see if it still works. Okay, it looks like it does still work. So let's test it with the other one, perhaps add some features here. So let's just say feature 1. And now we can try deleting that as well. And it also works. Very interesting. I expected this to crash. What I also tried in my testing was deleting via a confirmation dialog. So I don't want users to directly delete via a swipe action. I actually want them to have a confirmation dialog to confirm that. With a confirmation dialog, it did crash for me every single time I tried. So you can either leave this functionality via a swipe action in there, or how I want to implement it next is adding an archived attribute to our app idea to be able to actually just archive the app ideas instead of plain out deleting them. That way we can also have access to archived app ideas later on if we do decide that it might have been a good idea in the long run. So to do that, let's go to app idea and let's create a new field here, and I will say is archived. That will be a boolean, and I want this to be false by default, but actually we can just copy that over here into the initializer, and then we can also say self.isArchived is archived. This way, for all of the old values, they will not be archived. They will be set to false for all of the old app ideas that we have already added to the app, and for future app ideas, they will also be false, and then we can play around with that. So in our button here, instead of saying delete and using the trash symbol, we will be saying archive, and I think it is called archive box. We will see in just a second. And then in here in the button action, we can just say app idea.isArchived is true. Now let's run that in the simulator real quick just to see how it looks. So we still have our app ideas, and let me add a dummy idea here as well with some random description. And now we have our swipe action here with the archive box. All right, so that looks good. And now pressing that will not do anything. We don't have the animation because we're not deleting it actually. It's still part of the list. So next, let's update our list query to only show those app ideas that are not archived. So in our content view, let's change up the query here, and we will be adding a filter, a sort, and an order, but we won't be adding an animation, so we can get rid of that part. So for the filter, there is a new Swift macro that we can use, which is very handy, and it's just hash predicate, and then a trailing closure, and in here we basically get an app idea in, and we can now have just a boolean in here that we have to return that tells us whether we should show that app idea or not. So I will say app idea.isArchived is false, so we only want to show those ideas that are not archived, and in fact we can get rid of these two parts and just use the $0 syntax again. Let's also move the filter to its own line. Let's move the sort to its own line and make sure this is properly indented. We want to sort the app ideas by \creation date, which is also a property that we added to our app idea class. And we want the sort order to be backwards. Let's also move that to its own line. And once again, right here. Looks like it's not backwards, it's actually reverse for sorting order. So let's give that a run. And now you will see that our dummy idea 2, which we just created a second ago, is not part of the list anymore because it is in fact archived, which means that the predicate will be false for that app idea and it will not be part of our query. Now let's also implement a delete functionality for our app features. So we will go into Edit App Idea View, and for each of these features, let's attach a context menu. So we can long press and hold to open up a context menu to delete these features. So in here, we will just be adding a button, and I will just use the same initializer that we used beforehand in our swipe action. So I will say this is destructive, and I will also manually add a label, which will once again be a label, and the title key will be delete, and the system image will be trash. Now getting rid of this app feature here works a bit differently because it's part of idea.features. So we will say idea.features.remove all where, and now here we can pass in a condition. So let's have a look at how our app feature looks. So we do have a unique attribute, so why not use that to build our predicate here. So I will just say $0.detail description is the same as our feature.detail description. Let me also try out if these things are actually equatable. So then we could say $0 equals feature. Let's see if that works. And it seems to work. All right, so that's great. So now we've gotten rid of the feature in our ideas feature list, and now we can also get rid of it through the model context. So model context.delete this feature, and for that, of course, we need to actually grab the model context from the SwiftUI environment. Let's give that a run as well. So in our workout tracker, let's add a new feature, and then we can long press on that to bring up the context menu. You will notice that the delete button is red, which is because we gave it a role of destructive. This is precisely why I like to use these button roles in SwiftUI nowadays. And now if I press delete, it will be gone and everything works as expected. It's gone for good. I want to do two more things in this lesson. So first of all, I want to add a ContentUnavailableView to show an empty state when we have no app ideas. And then I also want to add some SensoryFeedback to archiving app ideas. So for the SensoryFeedback, it's actually super easy as of iOS 17. It's just a single view modifier that we need now. So we will go into our app idea list row, which represents one of these app ideas in our list. So we have our swipe action to delete here. We can also add the .SensoryFeedback modifier. For the feedback, I will just say perhaps decrease. And for the trigger, we will pass in an equatable value, which in our case, we want this SensoryFeedback to be triggered when our idea.isArchived changes, which only changes when it's being set to true, so when the idea is archived, which is precisely what we want. Now, I'm not able to test this view modifier right now because I don't have iOS 17 running on an actual physical device, and it obviously doesn't work in the simulator. But if you have iOS 17 installed, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a comment if the SensoryFeedback modifier actually works in beta 1. And then for the last part, let's go into our content view and let's grab this list here and wrap it in a group. That way we can keep all of these view modifiers, and we can now add some condition to say if ideas.isEmpty, then we want to show something, and only if we have app ideas we want to show this list. So if the ideas are empty, we can use a brand new view in iOS 17, which is called ContentUnavailableView. And we will be using this initializer with a title, and we can say no app ideas as the title. As the system image, let me have a look what I used before. So I think I used this one here. Let's also realign these. And then make sure that the description is not a string, it's actually a SwiftUI text. And in here we can, for example, say, or tab add to create your first app idea. And now if we run that, we will not be noticing any difference because our list is not empty. So for debugging, I would just say equals false here in our condition. And this is how it will look like when there are no app ideas in the app. So it will have the SF symbol that we specified, title that we specified, and description that we specified. Alright, so you have reached end of lesson 2 for the Build a Full SwiftData App course. In lesson 3, we will be migrating our SwiftData aspects to app groups so we can share them with app intents and a widget extension. And we will also be adding our first app intent so we can create an interactive widget in the next lesson. This is just a quick reminder that if you want to actually track your app ideas with a more sophisticated application than the thing that we're building right now, I would highly recommend you to try out LaunchBuddy. It's completely free. It's made by me. It's a project management tool made specifically for indie developers to keep track of your app ideas, your app's future updates, your releases, and all of the tasks that you have going on. You can try out LaunchBuddy with the link in the video description or the pinned comment, or just search for LaunchBuddy in the iPhone or Mac App Store.
Welcome back to lesson 3 of the Build a Full App with SwiftData course. In the last lesson, we did a bunch of things, including archiving your app ideas, and we also added this ContentUnavailableView here, which I just wanted to show you as a refresher. So if I rerun it in the simulator, then this is how the app actually looks if we have some app ideas in there. So we just have a list of all the app ideas. We can click on them and edit them as we wish, and then also add features to the app ideas. So pretty nice so far. In this lesson, we will enable the user to mark their app ideas as favorites. We will add a separate section here in our list for the favorite app ideas, and we will also be adopting an app group for SwiftData as a preparation for lesson 4, the next lesson, in which we will add a widget that gets synced, or that gets their SwiftData data store synced from the main app. That widget will also be interactive. All of that is part of lesson 4. This one is a preparation for that because we want to enable the user to toggle the favorite status of app ideas in the widget. That's why we're starting right now in the app idea file, which is our model class, and in here we will add another flag, and we will just call it isFavorite. Will also be a bool, will be false by default, and let's also quickly add that to our initializer. So isFavorite is a bool, false by default, and then self.isFavorite will be isFavorite, just like that. That way newly created app ideas are non-favorited, and then the user will have to explicitly favorite them. So with our model class updated, let's go back into our content view. This is the list that we have over here. And specifically, we have these app ideas list row. So if we command click on that to open that file, we will see that we have swipe actions here. So on the leading or on the trailing side, we can swipe to delete or to archive an app idea. So next we want to also add another swipe action on the leading side to favorite your app ideas. So let's specify the edge and allows full swipe in here. So we want this swipe action to be trailing, and we don't want it to allow a full swipe, because that way users can't accidentally full swipe to delete their app ideas. And then additionally, we will add another swipe action here for the leading edge, which does allow full swipe, because favoriting an idea is not a destructive action. So I think it is totally fine to allow the full swipe here. And I also always prefer the trailing closure syntax, which is why I refactored that a bit. And then in here, we can just add a button with a label, just as before. As the label, we will say favorite, and then this system image here should be a star. It should be non-filled if the app idea is not favorite yet, and it should be filled if the app idea is favorite. So we will say if idea.isFavorite, then we want star.fill. Otherwise, we just want star. And then for the button logic, let's just say isFavorite.toggle. And now we can run that in a simulator and have a look at it right away. So we still have our trailing archiving action, and now we have our leading action over here, but I really dislike this being gray. So instead of gray, let's give this entire button a tint of perhaps yellow. I think that should fit with the favorite theme. And now we can see we have a star here, but actually it gets automatically filled by the system. So I think that that our logic here doesn't really make sense. So instead we should say star.slash. Let me quickly have a look at how that is exactly used. So star.slash, okay, without the ed. So now if the app is not favorite yet, then we will have a star. And if it is favorite, or is a favorite app idea, then we have a star.slash, symbolizing that we are removing the favorite statues. So that's pretty good for now as well. And I think we are done with our app ideas list row as well. So let's go back to the content view where we have this actual list. And let's make sure that we show a separate section for our favorite app ideas. So in our list, let's get rid of this thing over here, and let's quickly just copy our list row, and we will add two sections. We will add one called favorites, and this is to be done. And then we will add another called all. And of course in here, we will then need a for each over our app ideas. I think it's just called ideas. Yeah. And then in here, we will have our app ideas list row. But we actually now need a separate computed variable to decide which ideas are favorite and which aren't favorited. Because right now, favorite ideas would be in both sections, the first one and the second one. So let's now create two computed properties here to make sure that an app idea is only ever shown in one of these two sections. So I will call this var favorite ideas, and this will be an array of app idea. And this will just be ideas.filter, and we want the filter to be the isFavorite flag. So only the ideas that are favorite will be part of this array. Then we can just copy paste that. And let's call this one non-favorite ideas. And you could just add the exclamation mark here, or I prefer this syntax because the exclamation mark is often overlooked in the beginning, which might confuse you in the end, which is why I just personally prefer using the syntax, as it's just a bit easier to understand. So now in our all section, we can use the non-favorite ideas instead. And then we can just copy that exactly for our favorites and use the favorite ideas. So now if we give that a run, we will notice that we have two sections. The first one is obviously empty. So let's swipe over our workout tracker, tap on that, and there you can see it is automatically moved to the favorite section, which is really nice. All right, so I want to add two more things. First of all, the app group, but we will do that last. Before that, let's go back to our list row, because in here we already have the sensory feedback when an idea is archived, but let's also add a sensory feedback of perhaps increase when the idea is favorite changes. And this way the user will get some haptic feedback when they're swiping over their apps to be favorite or non-favorite. All right, so that's already all the code. Let's now jump into our project file, and in our app target, we will go to the signing and capabilities tab, and we will select a new capability, and that one will be app groups. So let's double click that. And then in here, we can create a new app group, or I will just use a container that I already created when testing this out. So make sure you just select that container. All right, and that is already all the app group setup we have to do. Now in the next lesson, we will have a look at creating the widget, and then we will also make that interactive reading from our SwiftData store. In the last lesson, we added an isFavorite attribute to our app idea, which we can toggle through this swipe action here. And then we also added a favorites section in our list. We also enabled app groups for our main app. So today we can start implementing a widget that takes these app ideas, displays them on the home screen, and then lets the user tap on an app idea to toggle whether it is a favorite or not. So for that, let's get started by going to File, New Target, and looking for widget extension. And I'll just call this App Ideas Widgets. And we don't need to include a live activity or a configuration intent. I will just click on Finish, and then Xcode will generate that new scheme, and I will activate the scheme. Okay, so in here we just generated this folder. We have our widgets bundle, which is a widget bundle. And then we also have our app ideas widgets file, which contains our timeline provider, our timeline entry, our widget entry view, and our app ideas widget, which is the actual widget. And then we also have a preview down here, which we will probably not be using for the development of this widget. So first of all, I need to make sure that our SwiftData structs or our SwiftData model class, which is called app idea, I will have to make sure that that is part of our widget extension target. Otherwise, we will not be able to access this model class in our widget extension. But with that being set up, we are now able to use our app idea class in our widget extension. So first of all, in the extension, let's import SwiftData. There's one thing to note here. In between lesson 3 and lesson 4, beta 3 of Xcode 15 got released, and I'm using beta 3 right now as we speak and as I'm recording this video. Just so you know, this is running on Xcode 15 beta 3. All right, so now that we have imported SwiftData, we need to think about how we can load data from SwiftData without using the query property wrapper, because all of these dynamic property wrappers are not supported in widgets as far as I know. And I actually recently made a video about SwiftData with MVVM. I called it SwiftData with MVVM, does it make sense? And in that video, I basically showed you how you can implement a fetch descriptor without using the query property wrapper. So we will use that exact same approach in our widget now. So in our timeline provider, let's create a function, and let me reindent all of this and collapse the things that we don't need right now. So in our timeline provider, let's create a private func, and I will call it get app ideas and make sure that it's spelled correctly. And this will return an array of app idea. So in here, we will create a descriptor, which is a fetch descriptor over our app idea. And we can use, or we can leave this completely empty. So we don't need to pass a predicate and a sort descriptor. If you care about sorting or filtering what you fetch from SwiftData, then you should watch my other SwiftData videos where I explained that in detail. And we actually also, if we go into our content view of the main app, we also have a filter, a sort, and a sort order in our query property wrapper there. If you're interested in how that works with a fetch descriptor, as we're doing right here, then you should watch that SwiftData with MVVM video, because I am going over that in there. So we now have our fetch descriptor. What we now need is our model container. And this is a bit interesting because in our main app, we get that using the .model container view modifier or scene modifier on our window group scene here. And we're saying we want the model container for app idea and app feature, but we don't have such a thing in here. So we will say let model container equals a model container for our app idea.self. In our main app, we specified app idea.self and app feature.self, which is just the explicit way of specifying these. In reality, app feature has a relationship with app idea, which enables SwiftData to, just from using app idea.self here, inferring that we also need to create a model container for app feature, just because of the relationship that exists there. And we can have a look at that real quick in our model definition here. So we defined a relationship var features, which is just an array of app feature. So because we have that in place, we actually only need to explicitly say we want the model container for app idea.self. This is a failable initializer, so we will have to try to do this, and I will optionally try, and I will say guard let model container is this, else I will just return an empty array of app ideas. All right, so I think this is a good solution for now. In your main app, you might want to throw an arrow here and display that to the user in your widget, but I'm not sure if that is actually the best user experience, so you will have to figure that out yourself. In this video, we will just return an empty array because it's convenient to implement, really. And then here we can say let app ideas equals our model container dot main context dot fetch our descriptor. So this is also failable, so I will also optionally try this. All of this needs to happen on the main thread, so we can annotate this function with @main_actor to make sure that it always happens on the main thread, since we are using the main context here. But now this app ideas array is optional, so we could either optionally or nil coalesce this to an empty array, or just return app ideas and nil coalesce in here into an empty array. So this way we now have a function called getAppIdeas, which returns us an array of app idea. Now we want to actually pass those ideas into our widget, and we will use the simple entry for that. We don't care about this pre-generated emoji thing, so we can get rid of that. And I will just call this instead let app ideas be an array of app idea. Now, of course, we will have a bunch of errors in here. So first of all, let's fix the preview, and we will just pass an empty array in there for now, since we won't be using the preview to debug this right now, but in your main app, you might throw some dummy data in there, some dummy app ideas. And let me also fix everything in the timeline provider. And then, of course, the view will also not work because it's accessing the entry.emoji. So we can just get rid of that. We don't care about it. And we can also actually get rid of the time. We don't care about that either. All right, so now we have our function to get app ideas. So now let's go through our timeline provider and make sure to actually use this function. So everywhere where we have the simple entry, we can now just call getAppIdeas. And we have to make sure that we mark this function as a main actor as well, just because getAppIdeas needs to run on the main thread. So we can do the same thing for the other two functions, so getSnapshot and getTimeline. And in here we can say getAppIdeas. And then in here we can also say getAppIdeas. This timeline is actually a bit complex, so I think I will make it a bit easier. We can get rid of all of this stuff in here. All right, that looks good. And now in our timeline, we will just make the entry just a single entry, and the refresh policy will be after now advanced by 1 minute times 5. So every 5 minutes, this will now refresh, and the entry date is the date of when this function gets called. Now we can't quite run this yet because we declare the app idea as being in our widget target, but we actually also need to declare the app feature as being in our widget target. So with that in place, it would now build. So the build succeeded, but we're not showing any data in our widget yet. So to fix that, in our widget, we now have a VStack, which was already there before, and we can now create a for each over the entry.appideas and get an idea in. And then for each of these entries, we could, for example, now add a text showing the idea.name, which is our attribute up here. So we can say idea.name, and let's actually wrap that in an H stack, push that to the trailing edge, and in front we will add an image, system name, and this will be depending on whether it is a favorite. And if it is a favorite, we will say star.fill. Otherwise, we will just say star. And we might also give this a foreground style of yellow. So if we were to run this now in the simulator, we would not see any data because our widget extension does not use the app group right now. So let's add the app group entitlement to the widget extension next. So in our widget extension here, let's add the app group capability and let's select the correct app group identifier. Let's refresh that just to make sure it is correctly set up. So now with all of that in place, we should be able to run the widget extension now and then see our workout tracker and Vision Pro AR Explorer in our widget. So let's give that a run and see how it goes. And as you can see, we now have our App Ideas Manager widget down here on our home screen. It's a not the nicest design you have ever seen, but it works for now. And as you can actually see, the auto-generated widget struct in here has a very interesting setup. So I will actually make that a bit easier in here. This is handling iOS 17 and iOS 16. We're only building for iOS 17, so let's get rid of all of that. And for the background, I will just use the background color for a widget. So let's run that again just to make sure we have the correct setup. All right, and that looks a bit nicer without the tertiary background color. And as you can see, we now have our list of app ideas, and there's actually the dummy idea too, which we archived in one of the past lessons. So we're not filtering for unarchived app ideas right now. So let's perhaps fix that in our fetch descriptor. So let's add a predicate, and I will call this one idea in here. And let's get rid of one of these parentheses. And then in here we can say is archived is false. So now we're only fetching those app ideas that are not archived. And once the widget has reloaded, you will notice that we only have the 2 app ideas in there that we can also see in the main app because they are not archived. And you will also notice that the favorited one, which is workout tracker, does have a filled star, and the one that's not favorited has a non-filled star. So in the next lesson, we will build an app intent and enable interactive widgets here so the user can tap on one of these 2 app ideas to toggle whether they are a favorite app idea or not. Do you want to actually track your app ideas? Check out Launch Buddy with the link in the pinned comment and video description. It's completely free to get started and make sure you actually work on your app ideas. In lesson 4, we built this App Ideas Manager widget in here, which fetches our app ideas from SwiftData from our main app, displays them, and shows the user whether they are favorite or not. Now in this lesson, we will build an app intent so the user can so this widget is interactive, so they can tap on an app idea and toggle whether it is a favorite or not. So we will not care about the timeline provider. I can collapse that. Same for the timeline entry and the widget. We don't care about any of that. What we care about is our widget view. And then let's also create a brand new file in our widget. So I will say new file, make this a Swift file, and I will call this toggle favorite intent and make sure it's part of the widget extension. We don't need it in the main app right now. All right, so in here we can import app intents and we can perhaps also import SwiftData. And now we can create our struct toggle favorite intent, which conforms to the app intent protocol. For that, we will need a title and we will need a description. And then we will also need to implement the perform function, and just so Xcode doesn't complain, we will return .result, an empty result in here, and then we can write our logic in there. So for the title of the intent, we will say toggle favorite. For a description, we will say toggles whether an app idea is favorited. We want to pass an app idea into our toggle favorite intent. So we will add an add parameter property wrapper here with a title of app idea, and this will be our app idea of type app idea. So a bunch of app ideas in here, but this actually does not really work because we can't use the app idea struct in here. Now, luckily we made the name of our app idea, which is a string, we made that unique. So we can instead say app idea name, and make that a string. And with that setup, it now compiles and we don't need to do any additional setup for our SwiftData model class. If you're interested in conforming or being able to use your own custom types with app intents, make sure to leave a comment below the video so I can teach you about that in a future lesson as well. But for today, we will take the simple approach of just passing the name of the app idea, so then we can fetch it from SwiftData ourselves and update it with that approach. So speaking of SwiftData, we will once again need our model container, so we can go into our timeline provider and copy both the model container, the fetch descriptor, and all of this stuff in here. So we can put all of that in the perform function. We don't need to return an empty array, we need to return an empty result in here. All right, so this fetch in here is async, so we will say try await the result of this. For the predicate, we will have to change that up, so we will say we only want the idea which has the exact name as the one that we are interested in, which was the parameter that got passed into this app intent. All right, so then we will have an optional array in here, and then we can return or we don't actually need to return anything in here. So now we can say if let idea equals the result of our fetch request dot first. And then in here we can say let is favorite equals idea dot is favorite. And then we can say idea dot is favorite equals is favorite inverted, basically. So we will say if it is currently favorite, we will want to make it non-favorite. If it is currently not favorite, we want to make it a favorite app idea. And then we can just return out of the app intent in the end. So this is all that we do. We create our model container, create our fetch descriptor, which fetches the exact app idea that we're looking for based on the parameter that we got passed. We fetch that app idea, we make sure we actually fetched it, and then we toggle it the is favorite flag. Now, right now, we are not able to actually pass any parameter into this toggle favorite intent, so we will create our own initializer just like that, and Xcode actually auto-created it for us. If we create our own initializer, we need to also create an empty initializer where we can say app idea name is an empty app idea, and let me move that to a different place in the struct just so it's a bit easier to see. So let's move it in here. And now we should be able to use this toggle favorite intent in our widgets. All right, so just recapping, both of these rows here are just an H stack with an image, a spacer, and a text element. But we want to actually turn that into a button. So let's wrap that in a button with an intent, and the intent is our toggle favorite intent, passing in the name of the app idea. So I will say app idea.name in here. Let's have a look at that in our simulator and see how it looks and behaves right now. So we now automatically got the button styling for interactive widgets, and now we can tap on Vision Pro AR Explorer and you will see the list refreshes and the favorite flag is toggled. And the same works for the workout tracker. Now if we tap this a few times, the list might shuffle around just like that, and that's because we didn't specify a sort order in our fetch descriptor when we're creating the timeline. So you can add a sort order yourself. That would be a nice homework for you. Look at my MVVM video, look at my other SwiftData videos, and I'm interested to see if you can figure out how to sort these app ideas in your widget using your predicate. So that's it for this course. That's everything that I had planned. We are up to 5 lessons now. If there's anything else that you would want me to explore in this free course, make sure to write a comment down below. And if you enjoyed it, I would appreciate a like and a nice comment saying what you enjoyed about this course. Do you want to actually track your app ideas? Check out Launch Buddy with the link in the pinned comment and video description. It's completely free to get started and make sure you actually work on your app ideas.